If you're thinking about moving to Florida, I think there are 7 possible negative things that you need to know before moving to the Sunshine State. What is going on? This is Andrew. I'm a real estate agent with eXp Realty right here on the Emerald Coast, which is located in the Florida Panhandle. If you're trying to figure out everything there is to know about Florida's beautiful Emerald Coast, then please hit that subscribe button and tap that little bell so that you'll be notified every single time we do a new video. Before we get into the guts of the video, please be mindful that we are a real estate company first. So if you're thinking about moving to the Emerald Coast in any capacity, give us a call, text, email, carrier pigeon, smoke signal, however you want to get a hold of us, because we've got your back when it comes to moving right here to the Emerald Coast of Florida. So I moved here about 15 years ago, and I didn't really know what to expect back then, but now that I've lived here a little while, I've got a little bit of knowledge on kind of the pros and the cons, and today's video is not meant to tell you how terrible Florida is, because it's amazing, but it is to kind of let you know what cons are out there so that you'll know whether or not this is the right place to move for you. One of the worst things you could possibly do is pick up your entire family, move to a new area, and find out there's something about it you just can't stand. It's a deal breaker. But if you can get over these 7 different things, then you're probably really going to love Florida. Now, the first few of these are fairly obvious, I think most people know about, but the last one's probably going to catch you off guard. But let's start with number 7. The heat and humidity here in Florida is a little bit extreme, at least for about 4 months out of the year. As soon as you walk outside, it's going to be very hot, beaming down on you. Doesn't generally affect a lot of people if you're going straight to your car, drive to work, jump out of your car, go into your air-conditioned office. But if you want to spend a lot of time outdoors, as most of us Floridians do, and we do often, then you're going to have to get used to the heat. You're just going to have to put it in your head that you're going to take a shower, you're going to walk outside. It's going to feel like you need a shower again sometimes. Now, not all the time. Now, luckily, with all the heat and humidity, we've got lots of water sports and things like that to cool you down, but this isn't a pros and cons video. This is just a cons video. So let's get down to our number 6 con, which is hurricanes. Now, luckily, hurricane season is only a few months out of the year, but if the thought of a hurricane absolutely scares you and devastates you to your core, this is probably not going to be the state for you. If you live here long enough, you will go through a hurricane. You will actually be here for a hurricane, even if you try to evacuate most of the time, because sometimes these things look like they're not going to hit us, and the last second they turn. We actually just had that last year for Hurricane Michael, at least in our area. A lot of the predictions were saying, hey, it was going to go right by us and go a little bit further east, and we were just going to get the outskirts of it. And then at the last second, it just took a hard turn and just jumped right through our town. Now, it wasn't a very big hurricane, and it's just wind, and I mean, I get it, it's dangerous, but at the end of the day, it's not all that scary. At least you kind of get used to it. Now, our suggestion is, if you are moving down here and hurricanes worry you, just make sure you've got a really good hurricane kit. A lot of us out here, we always preach having a hurricane preparedness kit, and a lot of us don't even have one. So just make sure that if this is worrisome to you, that you get everything prepared so that you'll be ready for several days of no power if you're in one of those areas. If you're further inland or you're not right on the coast, you're probably not going to have to worry about this that much. I mean, even in our area, one of our cities just a little bit north of us, when a hurricane comes through, they barely get touched. It just feels like a heavy windstorm, and that's about it. But if you want to live right on the coast or a coastal city, you're just going to have to get used to them, and they are going to hit pretty hard. Let's move right into con number 5. And this is mainly for you outdoors people that like to do things in the mountains and the valleys. Florida's a pretty flat state, as you would imagine, so there's not a whole lot of that. Now, there are little pockets where there's some mountain biking, and that's put in quotations for a reason, because it's not all that mountainous. There's some hills, and that's about it. So if you're looking to do any of those types of sports, you are going to have to travel a little bit depending on what part of the state you're in. But if you are an outdoor type of person, we obviously have all the water sports and everything else associated with that, so maybe you can get your fix that way. Moving right along to con number 4 is that Florida is a pretty heavy tourist state. Now, this does all depend on exactly where you live at in the state, but for the most part, you're going to be fairly close to a tourist area just about anywhere you go. And this comes with its own pros, that you get access to all of that great stuff, but it's got its own cons. A lot of tourism means longer lines, a lot less access to some of the things that you generally like doing, especially if you're a local in that city, and it just makes a small town feel very crowded very quickly. So if the idea of having a whole bunch of tourists in your town kind of makes you a little squeamish, well, either move to an outskirt of one of those or Florida might not be for you. And con number 3 when moving here to Florida is kind of a big one, at least to me, and that is that our bugs out here are ridiculous. So for me personally, I would have loved to have known about the bugs ahead of time, not like I think it would have mattered, but that is something that you might want to consider if you just absolutely can't stand bugs in any capacity, then Florida is definitely not the place for you. Now, does that mean you're going to see them all the time? Absolutely not, especially if you're getting your house and your office sprayed, which is very common out here. You're probably not going to see them all that often, but just note that every once in a while you will. So it's not going to be like they're infesting the streets as you're walking down, but you are going to see them from time to time. And this actually segues fairly nicely into our second con, and that is the wildlife here in Florida. We do have them. You've probably seen videos of alligators and sharks and even snakes. We've got all 3 of those out here. How often are you going to see an alligator or a shark? Almost never. How often are you going to see a snake? Kind of depends on where you live. You live in a city? Probably never. You live in a tourist area? Probably never too. But they do live out here, so if you are in the outskirts or in a town that is a little bit more wooded or a little bit more outdoorsy, if you will, you've got a lot bigger of a chance to see some of these other items. Now, you'll eventually see a shark if you go to the beach all the time. You'll eventually see an alligator, but for the most part, I don't think I've seen an alligator out here in the wild other than at a golf course, and there's a restaurant out here where you can actually feed them, and I think that's it. I've never been driving down the street and seen a big old 10-foot monster crawling across the pavement or anything. I know I've seen videos about that. I don't know what part of Florida that is, but that is definitely not here. And I think it's one of those things where somebody posts a video about that and it's pretty popular, so in the few events that it does happen, that's a pretty easy thing to capture with your phone, and since everybody's got one of those sitting in their pocket now, it's very easy to capture these alligators everywhere, but in reality, you're not going to see them all that much, just being honest with you. All right, and for our number 1 con, well, it's not really number 1. None of this is really in the order of the type of con that it is, but just for numbers' sake, the last con that we have, this one is going to catch a lot of people off guard, and it's mainly for our area here in the Panhandle. So if you're thinking about moving to South Florida or another portion, this probably isn't going to affect you, but here where we are in the Panhandle, we have a lot of aircraft noise. Now, it's not all that bad, the actual decibel levels or anything like that, but you are going to hear an aircraft from time to time if you live anywhere, basically in the Panhandle. There are a couple of major military bases right outside of our area here on the Emerald Coast, and there's like, I don't know, 20 different variants of aircraft that are flying out here. 90% of them you're not going to hear. Every once in a while the fighters get a little bit loud. That's pretty rare. I couldn't even tell you the last time I heard one, but maybe I'm just getting used to it. I have lived here 15 years after all, and I actually used to live on these bases, so I think I drown a little bit of it out, and I think you do whenever you move here. But I know for a lot of people, as soon as they move here, they hear that and they're, what is that? What is that? You know, you're kind of going through that motion for about 6 months before you start realizing, okay, I recognize that sound. That's a CV-22. It's a big, like half airplane, half helicopter for all intents and purposes. And okay, cool, I understand what that sounds like. And okay, that's a C-130, or that's a, you know. So you start getting used to it, but in the beginning, you are going to hear plane noises. So if loud noises, or well, it's not even really loud noises, if just noises that you're not used to bother you, this might not be the place for you. Now, if you're inside most of the time, this isn't going to affect you. You're not going to hear them. Every once in a while, you'll hear some of the gunships going off, shooting their guns, or maybe a controlled detonation where they basically blow things up out at the range nearby us. You'll hear that every once in a while, but I think I hear a bomb go off maybe like every 6 months, because this is a big bomb testing area. But you'll hear that every once in a while. For the most part, they do it far off enough that you're never going to hear it. Now, you will hear the gunship shooting every once in a while, depending on which city you are in our area. But if you're living out in like Destin or even further east than that, you're not really going to hear any of it. So it really just kind of depends on where you're at. But we have gotten calls before of people asking us about plane noise. So I like to be very upfront and honest about that because it could be a deal killer for you. Now, those are the 7 different cons I have noticed from living here 15 years. If you're thinking about moving to the Emerald Coast in any capacity, give us a call, text, or an email. We're getting calls all the time of people wanting to move to this area, and we would love to help you out if that's you. All of the information should be on the screen, and of course, if you have any questions, put it in the comment section down below. We love chatting with you guys, and please be sure to hit that subscribe button and tap that little bell so that you'll be notified every single time we do a new video. Well, until next week, see ya!